Welcome to the May reading series presented by the Sundress Academy for the Arts. My name is Stacy Estep. I'm the reading series coordinator. And for anybody who doesn't know, the Sundress Academy for the Arts, or SAFTA, is a writer's residency and arts collective that hosts workshops, retreats, and residencies for writers in all genres, including poetry, fiction, nonfiction, journalism, academic writing, playwriting, and more. And you can find out more at sundressacademyforthearts.com. We'd like to thank the Tennessee Arts Commission for the grant, which has made it possible for us to pay our readers. Thank you. And now I'd like to welcome our Community Outreach Director, Arlen Dunn, who will tell us about this month's community partner. Arlen?
Hi, everyone. I'm Arlen, and I'm the Community Outreach Director. And each month, we partner with another local organization in the local area and just raise awareness about what they're doing in our area, and also invite people to donate to the work that they do. And also, we invite them to speak at our readings and share what they're doing in the community so people can get involved. And for May, our partner is ACN, which is the Allies of Knoxville's Immigrant Neighbors, and it's comprised of Knoxville people from all backgrounds who work to encourage dialogue and build understanding about issues related to immigrants and refugees, and to advocate for the dignity of policies, while also building a welcoming environment where immigrants and refugees can sustain meaningful community as our neighbors. And we have with us Milo Stanojevic, who is the co-chair of ACN, and he is on the board of Welcome Immigrant Neighbors of Blount County, and is also on the executive committee of Knoxville Immigrant Transit Assistance. Prior to his involvement with immigration justice, Milo worked in the international development for over 30 years with CARE, mostly in Latin America. And before CARE, Milo worked in youth empowerment and employment programs in East Harlem in New York City. Milo is native of Peru and went to college in social work here in the US. Milo, I invite you to share more about ACN with us.
Thank you, Arlen. First of all, I would like to thank the Sundress Academy for the Arts for selecting ACN as its community partner for May. And like you mentioned, ACN is really a network of people in the Knoxville area. And we're here to encourage dialogue about issues related to immigration and refugees, to build better understanding and to foster a more welcoming atmosphere for all people in which everybody's treated with dignity and respect. We've done several things over the last few years. We were supporting a program called the Weekly Witness, and it was an effort by volunteers from different faith communities who went to the Knoxville ICE office each week to provide drinks and snacks and coffee to immigrants who were reporting to ICE, and they had to stand outside in the rain or cold. And our volunteers carried a sign that said, "Love your neighbor," both in English and Spanish. We've also been providing assistance to undocumented immigrants and their families that have been affected by COVID-19. We raised $32,000 from our network to provide emergency assistance funds to 160 families in the area. And these undocumented people, even those who are considered essential workers, who've been doing all the work for many of us who were quarantining, did not receive stimulus checks, nor are they eligible for any other public benefits. We've also been supporting the KITA, which is the Knoxville Immigrant Transit Assistance. And what we do is we greet and assist asylum seekers that pass through the Knoxville bus station every day. And we're there with supplies, and we help them read their tickets and make sure that they know where to make the connections for other buses as they travel north to their final destinations. But the biggest effort for ACN has been the advocacy that we do to end the 287G contract between Knox County and ICE, which is Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And basically, ICE relies on local law enforcement to be able to beef up their capacity and detain and remove immigrants from the United States. But the program has very negative consequences because it pushes this vulnerable population to even greater risk. And there's no evidence either that 287G decreases crime. Like 80% of all the inmates with ICE holds were nonviolent offenders. In fact, it even undermines public safety because immigrants are silenced from reporting crime because they're afraid of the law enforcement authorities. Over the last 3 years, there have been 1,300 immigrants who have been processed by the Knox County Jail, and 85% of them were detained and then deported on a misdemeanor. So it's really, and it's a program that nationwide, the majority of law enforcement agencies have declined to participate in. And in Tennessee, only 2 of the 95 counties participate in it. And this is an ongoing battle that we have with Knox County Sheriff. And we recently discovered, for example, that the contract is illegal because the sheriff never entered the agreement with approval from the Knox County Commission, which is required by Tennessee law. But in spite of all that, the law is still there and the agreement is still there. So this is an ongoing struggle, and we hope that things will change soon with the new administration. I think that's it. That's what I wanted to share with you. Thank you very much for this space and for being able to share with you what a kid is doing in the Knoxville area. And I wish you all the best in this great event that you have here. Looking forward to listening to you too.
Thank you, Milo, so much for joining us and giving us information about Akin.
Thank you.
Thank you, Arlen and Milo. All right, so we're going to get started with the readings. Our first reader tonight is Ashley Iguanta, a poet, lyrical essayist, art photographer, and holistic writing guide. She supports others in their spiritual journeys by helping them develop a healthy connection to nature. Her first guidebook, Poet, There's a Spark Within You, is available through her website, ashleyiguanta.net, and we'll have that link in the chat. Please welcome Ashley.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. And it's always a little strange not to see everyone's face, but I'm imagining you sitting wherever you are. And oh, hi, Iris. And I'm just really grateful you're all here. Now that I see Iris, I feel like I wrote a lot of these poems with the support of a beautiful writing group that Iris is in with me. And I wasn't expecting to stay with them for so long, but I had a health thing that ended up turning out being completely like a blessing. And because of that, I stayed with this writing group for much longer than I thought I would. And I just want to thank them and Iris and Sundress for supporting me over the years. And yeah, so thank you for listening. And these poems are untitled except for one. So in between, there'll just be a brief pause. When the world changed, I wrote praise songs by hand. The ocean at night, the wild horse who found her way. This morning, I remember being enamored by powder blue water in pictures. I remember another horse, dark like a velvet flower, galloping through air that shimmered gold. And then memory becomes less interesting somehow. And there's an image of you holding my hand right now, moving into tomorrows, pulling roots from the ground, resting in the grass in the morning, something inside of us forming, like a praise song, but different. The thing that is loved within us, within you. I see it in you. Origins of the Big Dipper, as I remember it. In a poem, I wrote of my brother finding a watchdog in the night sky. He did not know what he was seeing, but as centuries passed, I learned what happens to those who hit the ground with 4 paws running, never knowing what death is, living in joy. When the world fell apart, I became a beam of light, like my little dog, but different. We were not angels, but we were not ashamed. I recalled so many things when I became that light, like how a fern is one of the only plants that does not flower. And when Alaska was born, I was not the only one singing. And in the sky, I remembered the first snowfall, maybe ever in the world. And contrary to what some may say, we didn't lose anything when we built our houses. Soup on the stove, dogs running about. We always used the big ladle, even now, especially now, so we can reach each other like we used to. After a long day, resting on the couch, my head in your lap. From my body, each piece of land was called something different. And your heart was not pink like in cartoons, like in history, but it turned into a prayer. And my body a flood, like Noah survived. But there's something about these new names for the land. Your heart, my need to be received, wanted, loved for the water that came from me. No, it would not be burdensome to carry. It would give life. Never would a storm be seen the same way. When I want to go back to the snowfall, to perhaps the first rushing river I'd ever seen, I close my eyes and go into my body, where earth moves and earth rises, cools and heats. When I wonder what touch will feel like again, I close my eyes and go into my body, a piece of the earth, created in the image of unconditional love. And I think, show me a bird who will stay and build a home near mine. Show me a spruce passed on, waiting to meet its next task, to bring all that heart from its long, careful life into my stove, helping me boil cranberries and greens for dinner. You may never hold a baby moorhen, but your body was made to stand next to them all. And sometimes, when your hands feel really empty before you sleep, it can help to partner with the land, bringing to mind that white-tailed deer you saw darting through the daylight. Now its body moving toward you, glittering like a comet in the grasses, galloping within the dazzling night. I stood at the edge of the marsh, and there, a red-winged blackbird at the tip of a tree, and behind, 100 lilies blooming in black water, and above, a rain cloud so big it could hold everything we ever were and ever would be. Today, I found so many cattails in the grass, some of the most strange and beautiful plants I've ever seen. There was a heron too, steady as a cloud, and a blackbird with hidden rainbows for wings flew past me. It was an honor to stand alongside the grasshopper, fire orange and wonderful, shyly speaking its right to be here. My teacher tells me to place all my hurt in a poem. So I write of the wild orchids growing from a palm tree. How glorious and unashamed they are in their interdependence. I remember canoeing down a wide river as the sun set. I was with a man I loved. We saw wild turkeys fly, and after nightfall, lightning bugs. We found our way home through instinct, moonlight, memory, knowing the riverbank with our hands. A map of sheltered darkness. Under the curls of that cornfield, Mahomet, Illinois. The other side of Alaska, summer. The time I rested my head on her shoulder, in the shadow of her hair, a place all its own. In the confession booth, maybe 9 years old, Long Island. Under the rain clouds, appreciating the quiet and the endless, simple grass, Everglades. My dog, finding her way to me at night, no matter where we were sleeping, Florida. The monk who listened to me for a long time. I take her words with me everywhere. My birthday, 34 lights. That cornfield, it must be harvested by now. Alaska, folding back into itself, shining gold in its glory summer. The woman I tried my best to love moved on. An older version of that 9-year-old girl. She's standing across from a Virgin Mary statue. She's in a parking lot in Pensacola. And yes, she has been forgiven. The Everglades, still quiet, but welcoming the fire orange grasshoppers into their forever fields. My dog, in the place all dogs go. And the monk who listened. She is still there, listening. As things disappear and reappear. The moon fading to lace, and then shining bold red neon. Or even our memory of the earth as it welcomed the moon's shadow midday, as the moon's small disk of a body glided over the sun, not to obscure it, but to love it and to protect it. I ask him about beautiful things, like the ocean of a blackbird's wing, like the yellow shining through egret feathers, wide in full flight. I ask him about a human taking another human in their arms. I ask him about my voice, if someone will love me like that, if I will shine like the sun, glisten like the ocean. And he says, every step you take, holding the wish of a life well lived, makes the world stronger, more wholehearted, even if the glimmer is in the back of your chest. It's there. Watch. Breathe out. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ashley. That was lovely work.
Thank you so much.
Right. Our next reader is Marcela Sulak, the author of the lyric memoir, Mouthful of Seeds. Her third poetry collection, City of Sky Papers, is forthcoming with Black Lawrence Press, where she's previously published Decency and Immigrant. She's co-edited Family Resemblance, an anthology and exploration of 8 hybrid literary genes. A 2019 NEA Translation Fellow, her fourth translation, 20 Girls to Envy Me, Selected Poems of Orit Gidali, was nominated for a 2017 PEN Award for Poetry in Translation. She hosts the podcast Israel in Translation, edits the Ilanot Review, and is Associate Professor of English Literature and Linguistics at Bar-Ilan University. Please welcome Marcela.
Thanks so much. Thank you all for being here. And I also just want to say I'm happy, Deborah, I'm happy to see you all, but I'm happy, Deborah, to see you, especially because of the first poem I'm going to be reading. I think I did a reading with you a long time ago, and I remember the book Echolalia, and it taught me that you could incorporate prayer into poems. There was a particular poem you read at the time, and I think that this poem that I'm going to read now is probably, it's been in the back of my mind for all of this time. Ashley, it was beautiful it's lovely to read after you. I loved your poems very much, and I think that I admire the quietness in them, because I feel like I have this urge and I always respond with movement and action. So it's a really beautiful balance I'm feeling right now to read after you. Thanks. And I'm honored to read tonight with to support Milo's project Akin as well. This is a really important project. So I'm going to start off, I'm just going to read 3 poems, they're long. And I will describe each one a little bit. So the first one is When I Sit and When I Stand, and it's based on a morning prayer. When I sit and when I stand, when I wake and when I fall asleep, I'm thinking of it. It is a slight pressure on the stomach, the length of a finger. It is the sudden ambiguous movement, as if from a field of zinnias, a kingfisher shot out of view before the eye could register it. It might not have been a kingfisher. I might have just imagined it. It could happen at any moment. I might have already missed it. It might not even exist, except in thinking about it, which I never do. Except when I sit and when I stand, when I wake and before I fall asleep, when I go out along the road when the chain comes off my bike and I yank it from the gears and lift the rear tire and guide it back on, when I wipe my hands of grease, when I run along the river, when I get home with my dirt street legs, while I'm grinding coffee, while I'm waiting for it to boil, while I'm selecting clothespins for the socks and snap them to the line, which will break sooner rather than later. And I say this too will happen sooner rather than later. The laundry line has been repaired with plastic twine, with ribbons from boxes of chocolate. When I set the table, when I remove the plates, when the water is running from the tap, while waiting for it to grow hot. Otherwise, I'm perfectly still inside my breath, which I send out into the world, which always comes back to me. Okay. And thanks. And Iris, I see Iris here too. Iris is guest editing with us on the Ilanot review, so I want to thank her and urge you all to submit. We're reading right now for the ephemeral issue. The next poem is called Until Further Notice, and it's a litany. I liked one of the things that Ashley's poem said about holding, I can't remember the exact way you phrased it, Ashley, but something about holding all of the world together, or all that is right now. And this poem is written as a litany. And I think a litany tries to do that. It's an imperfect way of completion and wholeness. And so here it is. I should also say that a lot of my writing practice is done while I run in the morning, or I ride the bus, or I walk around, or I garden. So until further notice. As the antenna at the military base at the bottom of Weitzman Street quiver at what's coming on the air and across the water. As the awkwardness of the unnecessary apology waits to be acknowledged. As the breakfast dishes yawn and roll over in the sink. As the black chicken in the ficus tree on Yehuda HaMaccabi Street waits for the twilight to fluff itself into weather. As the clothing in the shop, owned by the cat and chicken lady, waits to be turned into laundry. As the leaf crumbs and paper scraps and doll shoes and checker pieces wait to be found in the creases of the secondhand black velveteen sofa. As my daughter waits to be noticed in the clear waters of the bathtub and handed the soap. As the evening waits, for school has ended and we must walk along the river and eat dinner and read and bathe and go to bed. As the frangipani blades spin down and wait to be lifted into plastic cups and set on the table before someone steps, as their edges brown. As the guinea pig waits to be noticed among her crows and whistles and dropped a handful of hay. As for the habit that waits for its proper time and for its eventual departure. As for the Haredi family posing so temptingly on the riverbank across from the high school girls experimenting with their sexual orientation in the reeds. As for the holidays that wait for their costumes and candy and cooking and prayers, and the air that waits to mediate between our mouths and God's ear. As I wait with Vanessa in the cafe for the waiter to notice we are ready to go home, and he doesn't because there's a bowl of sauteed mushrooms and tomatoes at his elbow with caramelized onions. As the judge awaits the terms of our mediation, as Kansas waits for us to notice that where we are is not in it, as the laundry in the basket waits to be shed of its dailiness, and I place it in the unanchored washing machine to shake across the workroom balcony then drain and be hung in full view of the neighbors. As my legs wait to be taken for a walk, and the sun is stretching, and the grasses blow, and the river is still as a polished shield, which, like courtesy, deflects the arrows of resentment. As for the lovely narcissi, which sit uncomplaining among their bulbs and miniaturely bloom, I admit that I do not notice them much. As the metaphor goes, most days are gastropods with a single shoe to drop. As the neighbor and her children move below us among the fluffs of new dried clothes and the gleam of wooden, genderless toys. As the secretary offered me water and I was confused because I hadn't been crying. As the see-through plastic cup waits to be noticed under the table in the kitchen, and I do not bend to pick it up. As the poppies wait in their overblown clouds, dropping petals on the table. As the runes of dust made by the chairs pulled across the floor wait to be read and erased. As for the solitary sidewalk smoker, standing before many moonrises and sunsets and star sprinkles and drizzle, keeping his eyes at shoulder level. As the sidewalk cracks, await skates. As we await the Sunday phone call from the dental secretary, canceling the Tuesday appointment each week because Dr. Halper. Until the week I screw up the courage to ask how he is, and if we should find another dentist, and how to ask. And she hesitates and answers yes in a quavering voice. As the tiny sparrows bounce across the balcony and between the parted French doors. As the explosive undergarments on the Gaza burn victim in the poem by Sharon Ass that I am translating wait to be noticed at the checkpoint. As the voting booths wait to embrace each one of us in civic secrecy. As the West Bank waits its fate to be decided. As a thumbprint on ink has replaced the X. As you are here right now at the end of this poem, hello. That one was actually an abecedarian, thank you. And the next one kind of is too. They're litanies, but also the second word is alphabetical. And I was thinking about our purpose when we write poetry is really to just try to encompass our world, to try to make sense out of chaos, to try to make wholeness. And one way I find comfort in the abecedarian because it's a gesture toward that. It's encompassing and embracing, knowing that something is left out, but it's the impulse to embrace it and capture everything that I love. And this one is especially an homage for the Tel Aviv municipality garbage and waste management. And you'll see why I feel so strongly about them, okay? For the alt, oh, and I just wanna say, there's a guy that comes around and asks if we have any old things, alte Sachen in Yiddish, and you basically bring out whatever you don't want that isn't working, and they'll load it onto a cart, sometimes pulled by a donkey, and take it back, and they repair it and sell them in secondhand places. So this is what the first guy in the poem refers to. For the alte Sachen man is Sephardic, and his white donkey pulls the cart through 3 Ashkenazi afternoons a week. But a municipal garbage truck is green and the receptacle is hard plastic. For books and bottles which are recyclable are left on the curbside in lieu of charity. For the collectors, smart and calmly speed into the concrete niches where the receptacles wait in the shadows. For they collect the pillows and comforter and shoes and computer keyboards and various other events that my neighbors have left scattered all week on the sidewalk. Have they broken up? And placed them in the garbage truck without a single remonstrance. For the collectors are dressed in the same blue the sky wears at midnight, hung with stars and embracing a moon. For dreamers we are to them, for they don't discuss what we throw away within the range of our hearing, even if we forget to tie the plastic bags closed. For the garbage collectors put the receptacles back where they found them, for their hands are gloved in winter. For in the interstices of the 2 centuries, we discovered our Hiraya mountain of garbage had grown to 25 million tons. For the jaybirds it attracted proved destructive to the airlines. For just now, I've learned that my fellow Tel Avivis and I are the most wasteful denizens in this country, which wastes more food than any other except South Korea. For 3 kilos of waste per person per day, of which 31% is food. For when lifted, the garbage receptacle opens its mouth. For the machine that extends a rubber tube when the manhole cover is lifted and does what it does there in the middle of the night terrifies me more. For no one, not even the rain. For the neighbor's laundry was hanging for 2 months when I first moved in. When it began to fall on my balcony, I supposed the tenants had died. For the neighbor is an actress. When her laundry falls on the balcony, I return it. When it falls on the awning below, I sweep it off into the garbage receptacle someone moved into the alley for my convenience. For occultists of the city, the garbage collectors can predict the election, the success of the marriage, the daughter's future profession, and the next lotto winner. For paper probably constitutes the bulk of our household's waste. Today we collected a paper model home, complete with individual cucumbers and pears and strawberries and apples in the model refrigerator, which, as citizens of Tel Aviv, I shall plan to discard one by one in the weeks to come. For quietly the garbage truck sleeps from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. after a rub down and feeding. For relieved of our guilt, we too eat and sleep. For recycling has reduced the garbage mountain into a municipal park. For the street sweeper on our street was wearing discarded plastic shoes one day and the next new sneakers. For the city, for the street is aflutter with quieting chaos. For Tel Avivis rush and smoke and wear fabulous clothes, which they discard next to the garbage receptacles on our sidewalk benches, and several other denizens seem to be exactly my size. For thank you, municipal garbage collectors. For until I learn the art of contentment, I crave your clarity. For Victor was right. It is better to marry than burn, which is illegal in the city anyway. For waste not, for want not, for accept, for the years, for the yearning to argue over whose turn it is to take out the garbage. For it's your turn. I've been doing it all the days of my life before you came. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcela. That was great. All right, our final reader is Billy Artadros, an assistant professor in the Department of English and Theater at the University of Scranton. She earned her PhD in English from the University of Louisiana at Lafayette and her MFA in writing from Sarah Lawrence College. And she is a graduate of the Writers Institute at Susquehanna University. She is the author of 3 books of poems: Graft Fixation from Goldwake Press, Was Body from Indolent Books, and The Tree We Planted and Buried You In from Otis Books. Please welcome Billy.
Thank you. So first, thank you so much to Sundress and to Ashley and Marcela for allowing me to accompany you tonight. And thank you for those of you who are assembled for giving us your Wednesday evening. It's really a gift to be here. So I'm going to be reading tonight a little bit from my most recent book of poems, which is called Graft Fixation. So it came out on January 1st of this year. And I'm just going to share a couple of things about the book for a minute or so by way of introduction, and then I'll read some of the poems. So this book isn't a love story, but it starts with a love story. So in my 20s, I became an avid long distance runner. Specifically, I was a marathoner and I was a half marathoner. And I've said several times without even a hint of hyperbole that running was the love of my life. And I say that cautiously because although her camera is off, my spouse is on this call. And I got pretty good at it. I was never going to be an Olympian, but I won some local races. I was on track to qualify for the Boston Marathon. And then I was a passenger in a car accident. My injuries weren't life-threatening, but they were love-threatening, which is to say that my left knee hit the dashboard. And what followed next were a couple of surgeries, a bodily injury claim, which ultimately ended in an insurance settlement, and some physical and emotional trauma. And I was supposed to be writing a dissertation, and at least 2 people in this Zoom room were also at this university at the time, also writing or finishing their dissertations. And I found myself asking this question: how do I write, W-R-I-T-E, my body when I can't write, R-I-G-H-T, it? And that's a really problematic question. However, the book sought to answer that question, and that's where it starts. So one of the things that I do in this book, just to show you, I'm not going to read from these tonight, is pair some of my MRI images with text. Zoom is not super conducive to reading that, so I'm going to skip over those, but I just wanted to tell you about some of the forms that compose the book. I also took what I call the texts of my injury, so the police report, medical documentation, correspondence with my insurance company, and I performed erasures and blackout on those, and I appropriated the language of those documents as my own. And finally, I used at the time what was this popular Facebook app called What Would I Say? So if you never came across that, in 2013, there was a group of Princeton grad students who developed this app, and what it would do is it would take the archive of everything you had ever posted to Facebook, and it would run this algorithm following like the syntax of the corpus of your work to spit out these phrases that resembled things like what you would say. So another thing I did was just run this app over and over and over again to generate text. So really all of these formal experiments, I think, are asking not only how do you write the body if you can't write it, but also who gets to author the text of injury? What does it mean to be an author? So with that, I'm going to read a little bit now from the book. Thank you so much again for sharing your Wednesday night with me. And I'm going to begin with the dedication, which is both funny and somber, which is kind of my MO. For all of the men who have entered my body with my consent, most of whom have been orthopedic surgeons. On miscalculating the distance between pardon and forgiveness. Men always tell me what would prefer to speak through pain. I learned from the starting line. You have to decide if you move on. So 2 fun facts, that one was generated using this bot app. And also it then became this tattoo that's on my arm, the last line and a half of it. Okay. Accident report as homophonic translation. The passenger stated she was facing west. The driver's face was in the wheel, or the driver's face was in the well of his passenger's body, or the car was a well. The driver stated he was unable to avoid impact. When the investigating officer arrived on scene, it was asphalt, and he said, well. The passenger said that she was well, or the passenger said that she was a well. She was emptied. The emergency medical technician emptied the passenger from the well of the car and said that she was well. When the investigating officer arrived on scene, it was as fault. Upon initial contact with the driver, the investigating officer noted an odor of alcohol emitting from his person and asked him to step out. The driver said he was thirsty. The woman was no longer his passenger. She admitted that she was not his person. The driver said he couldn't stop the vehicle. He admitted that she was not his person. The driver said he couldn't negotiate the turn. The passenger was transported by ambulance. She would not walk. The treating physician's report said that she was well. The road was a wound that swelled around what was left, the vehicle. The driver was turning left into the intersection. The driver turned their bodies into an intersection. The investigating officer reported that the passenger stated she was well. She was restrained and she had no complaints. She was no longer a passenger. She was admitted. She was a road or a well or a wound, a well-ridden wound. So the next poem I'm going to read has a few footnotes, as does the one after that. And this is the first time I'm giving a public reading from this book, so I'm still trying to figure out the best way to indicate footnotes to an audience that is primarily listening or looking at the text, right? As opposed to reading it on the page themselves. So this is how I'm going to do it. And then you can let me know after if this worked. When I hit a footnote, I'm just going to indicate the number. So 1, 2, 3, etc. Right? And keep reading through the poem. Then after I've read to the end, I'm going to go back to the word or phrase that's connected to the footnote and then read the footnote. Okay. So this is mechanism of injury. Extent of deformity, severe. The passenger's skin hit the wheel. The passenger said that she was well. She was restrained and she had no complaints. The doctor noted a welt on the passenger. The driver said that she willed her consent. Later, she said that he willed her. Later, she called it an accident. The mechanic looked at the bumper and said, weld. Extent of deformity, severe. 1, here it's unclear whether we are narrativizing the body of the car or the body of the passenger. Hit the wheel. 2, who wheeled, who wheeled, who wielded. A welt on the passenger. 3, accident rapport, deformity severe, wound or watermark. An accident. 4, accident absolves, as in the passenger said that she was well, as in she had no complaints. Weld. 5, auto body. Ought a body be well enough? So this is called patient consent from, patient consent form. And credit for that title goes to my friend and fellow writer, Melissa Goodrich, who isn't here, but I know someone else here who knows her. So I thought I would drop that name. She was an early reader of this collection. Hi, Gary. Patient consent from, patient consent form. This is what I do remember. The throbbing, limb, the effusion welling below the scar like a zipper, and his hands reaching to separate the teeth, his teeth on the uninvolved flesh above the clavicle, so that he could make himself known. It was clinical, this betrayal. What I do remember. 1, had you been drinking? The scar like a zipper. 2, what were you wearing? To separate the teeth, his teeth. 3, did you reciprocate? A knee for a knee. This betrayal. 4, a knee for a need. This is actually one of the earliest ones I wrote, so it doesn't come from any of the processes that I described earlier. So this is called The Ways I Had Known My Body Were a Few. Fronds hanging from a femur. He said rapture, I said rupture. He said collision, I said collusion. He said faster, I said fast. He swerved, I starved. When I hit the curb, I remembered the taste of the smell of a smell, a meta olfaction, the sweet exhaust and the spider glass, how the windshield webbed and caught me, its prey or its salvage. Surgery is a kind of elegy, its probes and probity, its capillary truths. My therapist wants to know what it was exactly that running did for me. So I try to explain what used to happen before. The insistent sharp lateral ache, the ghost crunch of articular cartilage, the longing thirst of inhaling morning humidity, the agency of proprioception. A researcher asks me about my running tattoos. I tell her I am theorizing the erotics of running. I tell the researcher I would give up orgasms for marathons. Proprioception, 1. I tell my wife I don't know how to live in this body anymore. The erotics of running, 2. When I talk about this, I refer to Audre Lorde's The Uses of the Erotic as Power, in which Lorde defines the erotic for women as, quote, a considered source of power and information within our lives, as, quote, a resource, as, quote, that power which rises from our deepest and non-rational knowledge. Lorde concedes that, quote, there is a hierarchy, end quote, of the erotic, that, quote, there is a difference between painting a back fence and writing a poem, but only one of quantity, end quote, insisting that she finds no difference, quote, between writing a good poem and moving into sunlight against the body of a woman she loves. This is accident report as post hoc, ergo propter hoc. This time we're in the spillway, or we're surrounded, and I can see the meniscus curve against the panes. We lower the glass, watch the pit fill and pulse. That day you found me in the pool, this is what I was doing. Right before you entered me, I thought of water displacement. I practiced, exhaling the whole time, and butterfly kicked for the wall. I was afraid to write stroke because of the emergency room, so I clipped your lines. I crisped like impacted metal or oven-baked pork skin, the convected heat like the heavy breath of your stopped car. The smell of barbecue may have been coming from the radiator or from the backyard party we had just left. And I think I'm probably just going to read 2 more looking at time here. The next one is a loose pantoum. So you're going to hear some lines come back or almost come back. And this is called Settlement is a Motor, Settlement is a Vehicle. The adjuster is a sign. She stands in, for you, I cannot stand, for extended periods of time. Settlement is a vehicle. For you, I cannot stand, to atrophy. I contract when she says, settlement is a vehicle. Her neck's a violent rash, which starts to atrophy. I contract when she says, policy ceiling and pre-existing injury. Her neck's a violent rash. She starts at the photograph of your luxated machine. Policy, ceiling, and pre-existing injury, the vehicular innards bent and weeping at the photograph of your luxated machine. I contract. I sign. Okay, and I think I'm going to read 2 more that are short, or I may just read 1. We'll see. Okay, so this is called Even Nonfiction is Fictive. After the collision, another writer who loved the man wrote me with this inquiry. One thing that surprises me, how little comfort you seem to find in writing. If it can't heal, what is your relationship to it? She knew not to say catharsis. Years later, revising this manuscript, I find myself seeking anagrams for this word. Catharsis holds crash, holds shits. I write hiss, his car, rash, and scars. Almost wrath, almost catch. Collision. Accident absolves, as in the passenger said that she was well, as in she had no complaints. The man who plied me with whiskey coerced me into his vehicle and then crashed that vehicle into the back of another vehicle. Catharsis. In The Empty Space, Peter Brook says that, quote, catharsis can never have been simply an emotional purge, arguing instead that, quote, it must have been an appeal to the whole man. I find myself for what is forgiveness in this narrative, this body? Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Billy. That was amazing. So cool. All right. We don't have a whole lot of time left. If anybody has just a quick question that you would like to pop into the chat, please do so at this time. If not, we'll just tell you about some upcoming events and remind you to please donate to our May community partner, the Allies of Knoxville's Immigrant Neighbors. We have the link in the chat. And coming up, let's see, what do we have? We are excited to present Write in Rhythm, a workshop led by Alicia McKelty. That'll be on June 9th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. That's Eastern time again. Of course, over Zoom still. And we have the information in the chat for that. Here's the description for the event. We are musical sound-making beings. In your pulse, your stride, your foot tapping, that pen clicking and clacking, there is rhythm. By nature, all poetry has music. Written poetry, spoken word poetry, choreo poetry, etc. In this workshop, we will explore how to be intentional about musicality and rhythm in our own work by exploiting sound-conscious writing choices. Attendees will be given prompts and writing time to develop poems that employ rhythmic elements, as well as tap into performance techniques used to drive a musical poem. So that sounds really cool. I hope you can join us for that. You can check out the Facebook event for more information and reply there. That's in the chat. On Sunday, May 20th from 2 to 4 p.m., you can join our community outreach director, Arlen Dunn, for this month's Poetry CrossFit, our monthly generative writing hour. And you can watch our social media for more details about that. And then we look forward to seeing you on Wednesday, June 30th for the next installment of our reading series. And that will again be from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern time. And our writers will be Donnie Putney, Kendra DeColo, and Kalisha Ray. And again, you can find more information about that on our Facebook page. We want to thank all of you for being here, our writers who shared their amazing work with us, and everybody who attended. We always appreciate you supporting us, especially through these strange times when we've all been apart for so long. It's great to see your faces and hear your words. So thank you, everybody, and have a great evening. Bye-bye.